All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. A very welcome to this introductory lesson on reading comprehension. If you've been following my work, if you've been following my lectures for the past couple of weeks, I've covered almost everything pertaining to critical reasoning, and we've done at least 100 questions, if not more, of critical reasoning over the past 2-3 weeks. Now, why I began with critical reasoning was because even when it comes to reading comprehension, a major chunk of the questions are critical reasoning questions, right? So I wanted us to tackle critical reasoning before we jumped on to reading comprehension. Plus, the skills, they're almost the same. When it comes to critical reasoning, you've got one passage. When it comes to reading comprehension, you've got 3-4 paragraphs, right? Typically 3-4 paragraphs, if not more. So if in critical reasoning you've got to understand like 5-6 sentences, in reading comprehension you've got to understand at least 30-40 sentences, right? And you've got to actively read them, right, so that you don't have to revisit the passage again and again. So the tricks and the pedagogy, it's almost the same, right? So if you've mastered critical reasoning, if you've done well in critical reasoning, there are high chances of your being able to do well in reading comprehension as well. Having said that, I'll begin with the lesson in a while, but allow me to give you an introduction of the Unacademy platform before we do that, right? So, Unacademy is perhaps India's largest learning platform today when it comes to management exams. When it comes to cracking any competitive exam, this particular YouTube channel is for management exams, right? So, you've got exams like CAT, GMAT, NMAT, ZAT, and the likes. I am Prankur Arora. I am an educator, one of the educators for management exams with Unacademy. I've been a trainer and a coach for a better part of the last couple of years, where I've even had an opportunity to work with employees of organizations like Marico, Becton Dickinson, PGCIL, FMC Corp, Interglobe. Quite a lot of organizations from different industries. Uh, I also wrote this book called It's Not Funny. It's a work of satirical fiction. So, if you're fond of reading or if you're fond of dark comedy, be sure to check it out. It was, even positively reviewed by, greats in the comedy world like Papa CJ, Biswapati Sarkar. Uh, I hold advanced certifications from an American organization called Leadership Management International. LMI is perhaps the world's largest organization when it comes to transformational leadership. And I run a production house called Tamasha Entertainment, where we do a lot where we make films, where we do a lot of theater. The idea of Tamasha Entertainment is to work towards building a channel for creative arts excellence in our country. That's the vision we are working with. So yeah, there are quite a lot of features that enhance the pedagogy of an academy. Some of those features include giving you access to daily live classes. We've got live tests and quizzes as well, where we evaluate your performance. We give you in-depth insights and reports on your performance. All the courses on the platform are pretty much structured. They're audited by subject matter experts. They're up to date with the syllabus. And with one subscription, you get access to anything and everything on the platform. As I was saying, there are quite a lot of educators attached with an academy, and all these people, they have a track record of having successfully mentored, uh, you know, aspirants, having successfully mentored people who've cracked, various management exams and who are sitting in various top tier, business schools like your IIMs and XLRIs and MDIs and whatnot. Uh, you can experience all the live classes for free on the Unacademy app, and then decide for yourself whether you want to subscribe to the app or not, because with subscription there's quite a lot of additional benefits that come attached to the live classes. Courses and batches keep on getting formed on the platform on a daily basis. We've got educators who teach in vernacular languages as well. Plus, when it comes to the schedule, you design your own schedule. You've got the complete ownership of what you want to do, who are the kind of educators you want to study from, what are the kind of courses you want to enroll into. So all that liberty is with you, right? Plus, as I was saying, all the interaction, it happens in real time on the platform. Doubt clearing, discussions, everything happens in real time. Plus, there's a feature where we launch a lot of live polls and you compete for a place on the leaderboard, right? You compete for a place on the leaderboard using those live polls. Uh, I mentioned that we conduct live tests and quizzes. So we do that, and it is done in line with the exam pattern, right? So for example, if you're studying for CAT, your tests and quizzes, they'll be following the pattern of CAT. We'll give you those in-depth insights. We'll give you stuff like, oh, how much time you're spending on a sentence correction question versus the time you're spending on a critical reasoning question. What are your topic wise scores? How much are you scoring in SC versus RC versus CR versus para jumbles versus whatever, right? So we give you uh, that insight so that you can do course correction if required. You can develop some perspective about your learning journey. You can decide what are the kind of areas you want to be paying more attention to, right? So all that happens with the platform. Now, there are quite a lot of subscription plans when it comes to CAT that you can look at. But you can clearly see that as the time period of the subscription goes up, the cost of the subscription per month is going down dramatically. So I would recommend that you opt in for a longer learning journey, right? Now, where if you use my first name, which is Prankur, Prankur, you get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you go for. Now let's jump into reading comprehension. Now, before we, talk about the nuances, the nitty gritties of reading comprehension, I want to boil it down to very simple terms. There's quite a lot of reading we do on a daily basis, be it on social media. If you're working, you've got your work stuff that you have to read, right? You've got to read reports, you've got to write a lot of emails, read a lot of emails. Some of you might be reading newspapers, magazines, or some of you might be fond of reading novels, right? So there's quite a lot of reading that we do, but majorly it's divided into two verticals, right? Just give me a moment. Allow me to write stuff now. There's essentially two kinds of stuff that all of our reading habits can be divided into. One is, leisurely reading. You do it for leisure, right? You read magazines, newspapers, novels, you do it for leisure. You scroll social media, you read stuff for leisure. And then there's work reading, right? If you're in a research oriented job, you've got to read a lot of white papers, a lot of case studies. If you're into consulting, you might be reading a lot of case studies. If any kind of job, right, there's stuff that you've got to read, stuff you've got to summarize. So there's broadly these two types of reading that we do on a daily basis. None of them pertain to reading comprehension, and I'll tell you why. Because when it comes to reading comprehension, understand that in normal reading, today, modern English contains very short, very crisp sentences with maximum 10 words in a sentence. When it comes to reading comprehension, you've got at least like 25, 30 words in a sentence, right? So the sentence structure is very, very complex. Plus, you've got the bandwidth to not actively read these things. What you can do is uh, you've got the opportunity to reread stuff, but when it comes to reading comprehension in a management exam, you can't afford to go and reread stuff. Rereading is not an option when it comes to reading comprehension in management exams. So, what do we do? What we have to do is what we have to strive for over the next couple of weeks is to develop the skill of active reading, where you are very, very focused whenever you're reading something, and you're making sure that with every sentence you're understanding what they're trying to say. That is very, very important when it comes to both RC as well as CR as well as critical reasoning. Active reading is the skill that you've got to develop so that you don't have to reread stuff, so that you're being able to understand whatever it is that's written right in front of you. All right, having said that, let's move on to the next slide. How to summarize. Now, when it comes to reading comprehension, it's very important to summarize whatever it is we're reading, because there are multiple paragraphs, right? So if you're going from the first para to the second para, you don't want to forget what was written in the first para. So summarize it in 3, 4, 5 words maximum, right? Your summary, it has to be clear, so that you don't have to reread the passage to be able to answer questions. It has to be concise, so that you're not spending a lot of time writing stuff. If you have understood one paragraph, summarize it in 5 words. Don't write down 15 words right then and there, right? Be concise and make it conversational. Your reading comprehension will have complex words, but you have to make it conversational, so that when you're revisiting it for answers, you are being able to understand what you wrote. You don't have to develop context from what was written in the passage. So make it very conversational and easy to comprehend. Are you getting my point? So you've got to focus on that. All right, very important. The three C's, I call it. Keep these in mind. Keep the three C's in mind. Okay, just give me a moment. Let me write it properly. Yes, three C's. Right? Clear, concise, conversational. Let's practice this right now. Okay, let's practice this right now. Istanbul, Turkey. Okay, so this paragraph is about Turkey. Though Turkey has lurched forward without a functioning government for over 6 weeks since its Prime Minister Mesut Yilmaz lost the confidence vote in parliament, its foreign policy has remained assertive. Okay. Turkish leaders have learned to exploit its Eurasian position and burgeoning economy to achieve its goals. Now, there's like two contrasting statements in the passage, right? Two contrasting statements. They are saying Turkey has lurched forward without a functioning government. So, Turkey's government is in a mess. If we were to summarize this, government in mess. Foreign policy has remained assertive. Turkish leaders have learned to exploit its Eurasian position and burgeoning economy to achieve its policy goals. Now they are saying even though government is in mess, foreign policy is working fine. Why is foreign policy working fine? Because still have money and clout. Right? This is what they're saying. Ki we have remained assertive because we are exploiting our Eurasian position, that means clout, and burgeoning economy, that means money, right? So I've summarized this para in how many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 words maximum. मतलब जितना छोटा हो सके मैंने उतना छोटा लिखने की कोशिश करी, and this is what you have to do. Let's try this again. The continuation, this paragraph. Despite stern warnings of economic sanctions and military intervention, Turkey has benefited from a growing power vacuum in the Middle East. What are they saying? Turkey has benefited from a growing power vacuum in the Middle East, which for decades has been dominated by Russia, Iraq, Iran, and former satellites of the now defunct Soviet Union. In recent months, a series of foreign policy successes has emboldened the Turks to flex their muscles and build their influence in this chaotic region. अब ये लोग क्या कह रहे हैं यहाँ पे? पावर वैक्यूम मतलब अदर कंट्रीज वीक है, अदर्स weak, or rather we can insert an r here. Others are weak, so opportunity to act tough, right? This is what Turkey is doing. There is a power vacuum, so Turkey is now acting tough. और लास्ट में उन्होंने क्या बोला है कि they've had some success. So I have summarized the para in 3 lines. Others are weak, opportunity to act tough, some success. Are you getting how we have to approach reading comprehension? You'll get paragraphs like these and every para you've got to be able to summarize it in clear, concise and conversational terms. मतलब अगर आप ये पैराग्राफ पढ़ रहे हो ना, और if you've got a sibling who is younger to you, if you've got anybody in your family who's like in class 5, class 4 or class 5, who's like 10 years old, a 10-year-old should be able to understand this. This is what we have to do. Your summary, the two lines that you write or the three lines that you write, it should be enough, or it should be, you know, concise enough, it should be clear enough, it should be conversational enough, so that a 10-year-old is able to understand it. This is what your aim should be right now. All right, now what I want to do is I want to take you through a huge reading comprehension paragraph, and as we go through the paragraph, as we go through, rather not paragraph, as we go through the comprehension, as we go through the passage, I'll take you through all sorts of questions that can come in your reading comprehension portion of the exam. I'll take you through a long comprehension. We'll solve like 10 questions, and every question is going to give you an example of what you can expect in your management exam. Alright, let's read the passage now. I'll give you 3 to 4 minutes to read this, not more than that. And I'll read it along. It comes as no surprise that there is little consensus among economists who study the prospects for the new European Central Bank, ECB. Some are overwhelmingly enthusiastic about the ECB's potential to eliminate exchange rate currency fluctuations among its 11 member economies, while others are convinced that cultural differences and inevitable squabbles over monetary policy doom the central bank to failure. ठीक है, मैंने ये पैराग्राफ पढ़ा, अब मैं इसको कैसे समराइज करूंगा. टू मी द फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ टेल्स मी दैट देर आर, two things essentially that can happen. One is it could be great, the other is it could be flop. This is my summary for the first para. If you've not understood it, read it again and then I'll explain it. Okay, now what are they saying? They are saying that with ECB, for the new European Central Bank, we'll call it ECB throughout the passage, throughout our rest of the session. They want to study the prospects of new ECB. Now, some are overwhelmingly enthusiastic about the ECB's potential. Okay, so there are two things that could happen. One is it could be great. ECB could be great. What is the second thing? While others are convinced that cultural differences and inevitable squabbles over monetary policy doom the central bank to failure, the others say that it could be flop. ठीक है ना, सही समराइज करा. अब नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ पे चलते हैं. The pessimists have a valid point. Okay, this is very important. Underline this. Pessimists have a valid point. The ECB's primary goal, as specified by the Maastricht Treaty, is to bring about price stability within its area of sovereignty. This stability, however, is predicated on reducing the current incongruity of prices throughout the region. Currently, though, there are too many cultural and financial variables that prevent prices from coming into alignment anytime soon. Now, what are they saying? That the author is saying pessimists have a valid point. So now, even the author thinks that it could be flop, right? And then he develops on it, or she develops on it further, saying that it is impossible to keep prices same, right? There are too many variables, it is impossible to keep prices the same, and countries are very different. Countries different, impossible for prices to be same. Right? This is my summary for the second paragraph. Read it again if you've not understood this. Next paragraph. For a start, the prices of many products sold in Europe already vary from country to country by large margins. ठीक है. The average cost of a pair of blue jeans is 34% higher in Germany than it is in Italy. Some reasons for this can be remedied through legislation. Okay. If Germany were to repeal its law prohibiting supermarkets from stocking aspirin on their shelves, for example, aspirin prices might come in line with the rest of the European Union. But most price differentials derive from seemingly immutable standards of living. Personal incomes in Spain and Portugal are well below the European average, as they have been for decades, right? Thus, prices stay lower to accommodate weaker buying power, and since Scandinavian countries show no sign of adopting the high demand for coffee products that exist in France and Italy, coffee prices will remain much higher in southern Europe than in the north. Now, what are they saying? They're only giving you more examples for why it could be flop, right? Examples for how countries are different, examples for how bargaining power is different, examples for how legislation is different. So, examples plus I will write support for for para 2. This is my summary for the third paragraph. Right? I'll go to the next slide in a minute. If you've lost anything, if you're still reading this, if you're still digesting what I've done, take 60 seconds, go through it, and then I'll shift to the next slide. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. Until now, this is the fourth paragraph. Until now, Europe's different currencies have done well to divert consumers' attention from these price differentials. But now that Europe has adopted its one currency, the euro, Europeans are more likely to seek out the best price regardless of geography. This could mean depressed localized economies of scale. Many countries will not recover from this situation in the short term. Wow. Now they are saying there could be what? More problems. अब लोग ये लोग क्या कह रहे हैं? There could be more problems. What more problems? Because of what? Because of the euro, which is what? New money. More problems cause of new money. All right. Now let's move on to the next para, the fifth para. Fortunately, fortunately, for the ECB's architects, there are two extraordinary financial models to study and replicate. Okay, there are two examples. The German Bundesbank and America's Federal Reserve Board. Each country within the European Union, regardless of its population or the size of its gross domestic product or the GDP, will be represented equally in ECB's governing council, which will dictate the policies that the various national central banks will implement. Okay. As long as the lines of communication remain open and country representatives keep an open mind toward what may become a radical overhaul within European commerce, the euro and the ECB have a fighting chance to survive. Now, this para, the tone is changing a little bit, right? This para from the very first word itself, fortunately. So this para, if you've read it well, if you've read it correctly, is giving us some positives about the ECB. अब तक हमें बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स गिनाई गई थी, but this para is now giving me some positives about the ECB. And in the end, they could even saying that they are even saying it could be a success. Fighting chance to survive means could be success. Could be a success. This is my summary for the fifth paragraph. Take another minute, digest it all, and then I'll move on. Give me a moment. Right. I hope you've read this by now. Alright, so we've read the entire passage. We've covered whatever it is they're trying to tell us. We know it is about European Central Bank. We know the writer of the passage is, the writer of the passage begin the second paragraph by saying pessimists have a valid point. So that means even the writer of the passage is giving his or her or their inputs, their opinion, right? They are saying that either it could be a success or it could be a flop. Then they begin by giving us reasons for why it could be a flop. Then they give us examples for why it could be a flop. Then they even count out more problems because of the introduction of the new money, which was euro. And then in the very end, they end it with a ray of optimism that there are some positives as well, and maybe, just maybe, it has a fighting chance for survival. It could be successful, right? So this is what the passage is about. Let's begin with some questions now. Now, before we do that, let me tell you that for every reading comprehension, there are two types of questions you will get. Two types of questions: general, general questions, and specific questions. General questions are stuff like what is the idea of the passage? What is the primary purpose of the passage? What is the tone of the passage? What is the structure of the passage? Let me even write that down for you guys. General questions are like idea, purpose, or tone, structure of the passage. Specific questions are the ones, and if you've written the summary down well and if you've understood the meaning of the passage, then you, for general questions, you never have to revisit the passage. Specific questions is जहाँ पर आपको you have to refer to the passage. I am writing refer to passage. This is what you have to do when it comes to specific questions. That is the difference between general questions and specific questions. Let's begin with a few general questions now. What is the primary purpose of the passage? Remember what the passage is trying to say, right? Remember what the passage is trying to say. Remember how they've approached it. Remember all that, right? And let's read this now. Primary purpose of the passage is to, we'll always follow the process of elimination. We'll read every option and we'll see whether it is making sense or not. Compare the ECB to other financial governing bodies. uh, B says, assert that the European countries that have not yet embraced the euro are destined to do so before too long. Okay. C says, provide support for the theory that Europe's transition to a central bank will have many obstacles. Fourth, enumerate several examples of the constantly changing global financial climate. 5. Prove that the ECB will never bring about the price stability on which its survival so dearly depends. Now, let me give you some hints. Whenever we talk about primary purpose of the passage, we have to make sure that, primary purpose of the passage, you'll get a lot of hints from the options. For example, from option D, this is enumerate several examples of the constantly changing global financial. Now, it is saying global. Were we talking about the entire world or were we talking about Europe? So you will have answer options which are broad, very, very broad, right? This is too broad. I mean, there were examples of changing financial climate, but there were no examples for changing global financial climate. It was very Europe centric, right? So it's not as broad, so we eliminate option D. Similarly, look at option E. Prove that the ECB will never, this is a very strong word, will never bring about the price stability on which its survival so dearly depends. Now, this answer option is extremely negative. If you remember the last paragraph was positive, was it not? The entire three paragraphs before it were negative. They were counting off problems, but the last paragraph was positive. It ended on an optimistic note. So, our passage, but this answer option is very, very negative. Will never is very strong word. So, we should shy away from strong words, from strong opinions when it comes to primary passage or central idea of the reading comprehension. Let's look at answer option A and B now. A says compare the ECB to other financial governing bodies. I mean, they were mentioned briefly in some of the paras. For example, we mentioned Germany ka Bundes something bank, right? Bundesbank, and then there is America's Federal Reserve. But this is like in the fourth paragraph or the last paragraph where you're mentioning a couple of examples, but that is not the primary purpose of the passage, right? Those were examples, those were comparisons, but the primary purpose was not a comparison. It did not begin from the first paragraph itself, right? So we can eliminate A as well. Let's look at B and C now. Assert that the European countries that have not yet embraced the euro are destined to do so before too long. Uh, did it assert it? I don't remember anywhere in the passage where the author is saying that you know they will embrace the euro and are destined to do so before too long. No mention. I don't remember this being mentioned at all. So I eliminate B as well. C is the only option that's left. Let me read it out and let me explain it to you. Provide support for the theory that Europe's transition to a central bank will have many obstacles. Yes, kind of makes sense, right? How did the writer begin the journey? The writer laid out the introduction. For example, if you remember, in the very first paragraph, the writer says this could either be great or it could be a flop. Then the writer spends the next paragraph and the paragraph after that giving you examples for the kind of problems we can face, right? Then the writer spends another paragraph giving you a different problem, which was a money problem. And finally, in the last paragraph, the writer concludes by saying that in spite of all these problems, maybe it could be a success. They can have a fighting chance, right? So this is what the writer is trying to say. So the purpose of the passage is to provide support for the theory that Europe's transition to a central bank will have many obstacles, but in the end there is a fighting chance for survival as well. Okay, so this is what the primary purpose is. So if you just to reiterate, whenever you get such questions where you have to find out the primary purpose or you have to write down the central idea, what is the central idea of the passage, right? In such questions, shy away from broad answer options, shy away from extremely negative answer options, shy away from when there is no mention, that means it's irrelevant, shy away from irrelevant or out of scope answer options, right? Don't pay any heed to these. All right, and always follow the process of elimination. All right, let's move on to the next question. In the passage, the author is primarily concerned with which of the following? So again, this is a very general question. There is no reference to for you to go and revisit the comprehension. If you've written down the summary, the one line summary, the few word summary for every paragraph, then you will be able to figure this out. Let's read it. Uh, in the passage, the author is primarily concerned with which of the following? Answer option 1. Comparing two different approaches to resolving a conflict. Was there a conflict in the passage? I don't remember there being talk about any conflict, so I can safely eliminate A. uh, Expressing dismay over a poorly reasoned conclusion. Was the author expressing dismay? See, remember, now here I can eliminate this because I know that the author was slightly skeptical, but in the end, the author ended on a positive note and on an optimistic note. So, this answer option is not expressing any optimism of the author at all. Any optimism at all. This is again very, very negative, extremely negative. So, I'll eliminate option B. Presenting information and offering different ways to interpret it. There was only one way to interpret it, right? The author was telling us problems, the author gave us examples, and then the author told us that maybe it could be great as well. Maybe there is a fighting chance for survival, right? So there was only one way to implement it, not different ways to interpret it at all. I eliminate C. D. Describing a problem that will not be solved easily. Yes, the author was describing a problem that will not be solved easily. The author gave us many examples, and then the author said that maybe it can be done. Maybe if they do it right, they will be successful, right? So, author described the problem and told us that yes, it's not at all easy to solve this because I'm giving you so many examples. There's evidence that the author gave us, right? So, D looks to be the correct answer. If I don't get a better option in E, I will go with D. E says defending an established policy. No, the author was not defending any established policy. Plus, the author did not even discuss a policy. There was no specific policy that was discussed. There was European Central Bank that was discussed. No policy at all. So I eliminate E as well. And D, as I was saying, looked to be the good option, the better option out of the entire lot. The best, rather, not the better, the best option. So I will go with D. I hope you've understood this. I hope you're understanding all this. This is not a live class. I'm recording this right now for you guys, and it will premiere it. And it's going to premiere on a Monday at 12 p.m. I think the date would be 7th, right? If I'm not wrong, it will be the 7th. So I hope you're understanding this. If you're not, note down your questions, and whenever we either comment on this video, right? Comment on this video, and I will respond to all your answer options. But do that. If you're getting any questions, comment on the video so that I can revisit this question. I can revisit the strategies and the concepts that I'm discussing right now and explain it furthermore, right? So do that, please. Let me return to the comprehension now. We'll move on to the third question now. What is the third question? Which of the following best describes the organization of the passage? Again, this is a structure question, right? This is a structure question. Here they are asking you to identify the structure that the reading comprehension follows. Again, this is a very general question. This is pertaining to structure. Let's look at all the answer options. Two historical backgrounds are compared and contrasted. Are there two backgrounds compared and contrasted? Are there historical backgrounds? There was no historical background. I'll eliminate A. A problem is identified, discussed, and resolved. Now, I'll put this on a back burner right now. I'll put this on a back burner. See, a theory is discussed and evidence is introduced to condemn it. Okay, there was evidence introduced to condemn it, but there was scope for positivity as well. Answer option does not give me any scope for optimism, so I eliminate C. Okay. D. A paradox is described and one side is shown to be more dominant than the other. Again, a paradox is a strong term here. Was there a paradox? I don't think there was a paradox at all. Do you guys understand what a paradox means? Right? Do you guys understand what a paradox means? Paradox is again a very, very strong term. Maybe we can revisit the passage and see if the author concludes in a paradoxical manner. What is a paradox? Paradox is a self-contradictory statement, guys. Paradox is a counterintuitive outcome. I mean, their paradox. It's like saying that this sentence is false. If I say that this conclusion is false, that means I am saying that it is paradoxical because it is conclusion. That means it's true, but then I am saying the conclusion is false. Right? So, this statement where I say this conclusion is false is paradoxical. I don't think the passage is a paradox at all. The author has followed a very smooth path where the author talks about something, introduces the context, tells me that this is problematic, gives me examples for why it is problematic, and then says that maybe there is scope for optimism. The author does not end on a negative note, the author ends on a positive note. So there is no paradoxical uh, setting here. A debate is introduced and supporting evidence for both sides is presented. Now I am left between E and B. B says the problem is identified. Yes, the problem was identified. It is discussed. Yes, it is discussed. Was it resolved though? The author was optimistic in the end, but did the author resolve it? The author did not resolve it, did he? Or did she? The author said, as long as lines of communication remain open and country representatives keep an open mind toward what may be a radical overhaul within European commerce, the Euro and the ECB have a fighting chance to survive. Right? So the author ends on this optimistic note, but the author does not resolve it. The author does not give us any solutions, right? So that is why I'll eliminate B and I'll prefer E, where I'm saying that a debate is introduced. Yes, the debate is introduced. Supporting evidence. Yes, there is supporting evidence for both sides. Yes, there is supporting evidence for both sides. There is no solution, but there is evidence for both sides, right? So that is why I'll go with E. E looks to be the only viable and the correct option here. Fourth, which of the following best describes the relation of the last paragraph to the passage as a whole? So I have to describe the relation of the last paragraph. Remember, the optimistic paragraph was the last paragraph. uh, Let me just follow the process of elimination quickly. I have told you a lot about it as already. It advances an argument to be debated further. No, it does not. It does not advance any argument to debate further. It outlines a process to be re examined. Does it outline a process? No. The author just ends on an optimistic note that if you do this, if you keep an open mind, maybe you have a fighting chance. It adds some positive points to an otherwise negative outlook. Yes, definitely. It adds positive points to an otherwise negative outlook. The entire 3 4 paragraphs that came before it, the author was counting off problems and giving us examples, but in the end, some positive points. It reinforces a theory that is not easily it does not reinforce any theory. It poses a question. No, it does not pose a question. Rather, it says that if you do this, if you keep an open mind, maybe you have a fighting chance for survival. No question posed. So C looks to be the only correct answer here. Yes. Let's move on to the next question. Again, a very general question. The author's attitude towards the success of the ECB can be described as attitude. This is a tone question. They want you to tell us the tone of the passage. Was the author indifferent? If the author would have been indifferent, the author would not have expressed his opinions. The author also believes that there it is problematic, that there are a lot of problems, right? So the author is not indifferent. The author has a buy-in. The author has an opinion. Hostility. Is the author hostile? The author isn't hostile because the author ends on a positive note. So I eliminate this as well. Is the author skeptic? The author is skeptic, right? The author says that there are so many negative points, yet there is a fighting chance for survival. The author does not say that you can do it, or rather, the author does not say that you will do it. The author says you can do it if you keep an open mind, if you, try to resolve some of the problems. So the author is a skeptic, right? The author is saying that there are so many problems. It is, I have a tough chance. I'm having a tough time trying to figure out how you can be successful here, but there is scope for success. So the author is a skeptic, according to me. The and then let me eliminate all the other options as well, no? To be more sure, let's follow the process of elimination. Amusement. Is the author amused? The author is not amused at all. Is the author, is the author having some admiration for this? The author does not have admiration. The author is giving us pros and cons, right? So, skepticism looks to be the most appropriate answer here. The author most probably mentions the Bundesbank in order to. Now, this is a very specific question. We might have to revisit the passage. Just read it as I drink some water. The author most probably mentions the Bundesbank in order to do what? We'll have to skim the passage, right? Let's just go. Let's just see where Bundesbank is. Let's read all the options. Let me read all the options first. Suggest an alternative composition of the ECB's governing council. Okay. Compare its fiscal policies to those of Federal Reserve Bank. Okay. Provide an example of a financial institution to which the ECB will never measure up. Again, strong word. Indicate that there are other established fiscal entities for the ECB to emulate. Urge the German government to ease its restrictions. Okay. ECB is mentioning Bundesbank here, right? Let's the last paragraph. Let's just read this. Fortunately, the ECB's architects, there are two extraordinary financial models to study and replicate: Bundesbank and American Federal Reserve. So we just had to look at where Bundesbank was mentioned. Or did this suggest an alternative composition for governing council? No, they did not. Compare its fiscal policies? No, they did not compare fiscal policies. Provide an example of a financial. There is it is an example, but did they say they will never measure up? No, they did not. Indicate that there are other established entities for ECB to emulate? Definitely yes. Urge the German government to ease its restrictions? No, they did not. Right? Did they urge the German government? See, governing council is mentioned, but just read the sentence. Each country within the European Union, regardless of its population or the size of its GDP, will be represented equally in ECB's governing council, which will dictate, sorry, the policies that the various national central banks will implement. Anything about Germany doing something or requesting Germany for something? No. What was the purpose of mentioning governing council? The purpose was different. Did they suggest alternate composition? They did not, right? So D looks to be the most viable and the most appropriate answer here. Very specific question, right? You had to revisit the passage to see which was the valid option. The passage most clearly implies which of the following. So when we say imply, what do we mean by imply? By imply, what we mean is that which of these answer options it has to be true based on what is mentioned in the passage. One of these has to be true, right? So let's read all the options. Countries whose economies are depressed by the price wars following the arrival of the euro will eventually rebound and prosper. Where was this mentioned? I think this was on the last page only, right? Again, just read what the option says. Countries whose economies are depressed by the price wars following the arrival of the euro will eventually rebound and prosper. Until now, Europe's different countries have done well, but now the Europe has adopted its currency euro. Europeans are more likely to seek out best price regardless of geography. This could mean depressed, localized economies of scale. Many countries will not recover from this situation in the short term. So they are saying will not recover. What does this say? Will eventually recover. So this is incorrect. B. The average German or Italian has more disposable income than does the average Portuguese or Spaniard. Okay. Was there anything in the passage about this? Personal incomes in Spain and Portugal are well below the European average, as they have been for decades. Hmm. But did they talk about disposable income? They talked about personal income. Did they say the German or Italian has more disposable income? They talked about Portuguese and Spaniard having less income. But did they say anything about these guys having more disposable income? Did they say anything of that sort? I don't think so, right? But still, because this is confusing me, I'll put this on the back burner and see if I've got a more viable option, right? So I'll put this on the back burner right now. Were it not for the Maastricht Treaty, the ECB would never have come about. Now, I remember something about the Maastricht Treaty, uh, right? I remember something about the Maastricht Treaty. Uh, let's see. Rather here. The ECB's primary goal, as specified by Maastricht Treaty, is to bring about price stability within its area of sovereignty. But is there like a cause effect relationship that it would not have come about without Maastricht Treaty? Nothing of that sort is mentioned. So I can eliminate C. The arrival of the euro has not solved the problem of price disparity in Europe. This kind of looks to be one of the better answers to me. Better than B. Because I remember very clearly somewhere here this being mentioned, right? But now Europe has adopted euro. Europeans are more likely to seek out best price regardless of geography. This means they'll haggle. This could mean depressed localized economies of scale. Many countries will not recover from this situation in the short term. So this is something that is implied in the paragraph, right? That there is price disparity in Europe. Arrival of euro has not solved that problem, right? So this looks to be the more appropriate option than B. E says the governing council may have to alter its plan of equal representation to account for the contributions of each country to Europe's overall GDP. Again, this is not something that is mentioned in the passage or is hinted in the passage. Uh, that they'll have to alter its plan for equal representation. No hint at all, so I can safely eliminate E. D looks to be the correct answer, right? Let's move on to the next question now. The passage suggests that the author believes which of the following? Okay. Passage suggests that the author believes which of the following? Option A. Stabilizing the euro within global currency markets is the first step towards its legitimacy as a viable saving vehicle. Was there any talk about viable saving vehicle? There wasn't any talk, so I can safely eliminate A. You can skim through the passage also to look for these words. You will not find these words. Cultures of the various European countries will begin to grow together soon after the euro completely supplants all the separate currencies that are now in use. There is no mention of how cultures will, they'll grow together soon. The problem was that different countries have different cultures. That is what was mentioned in the second passage, right? This is what was mentioned here, that countries are different. There are too many cultural and financial variables. And then this contained examples. कॉफी का एग्जाम्पल था, जीन्स का एग्जाम्पल था, कितने सारे एग्जाम्पल थे, राइट? तो कल्चर्स की डिफरेंट होने के एग्जाम्पल हैं, बट देर इज नो मेंशन ऑफ देम ग्रोइंग टुगेदर. सी, multiple factors will prevent price stability from happening anytime soon, yes, and it probably won't happen at all. Now, does the author believe this? I think the author is hinting towards it. The author is skeptic. The author is saying it probably won't happen, but if you keep an open mind, maybe there's possibility. That is what the author is saying. So if I don't get a better answer, I'll stick to this. D. Bundesbank should assume all financial responsibilities for the European Union until the ECB becomes fully operational. That is not suggested at all. They gave examples of Bundesbank and Federal Reserve, but they did not say that it should resume all responsibilities. I can eliminate D as well. E. The gross domestic product of a nation should determine the number of delegates that nation sends to ECB's governing. No, there is no hint whatsoever about this. C looks to be the only correct option to me. That the author is skeptic. The author thinks price stability will not happen, and it probably won't happen. But the author still thinks that if you keep an open mind, all channels of communication open, then maybe it there is a fighting chance. But the author does not think that it will happen, right? The author is kind of negatively predisposed to it. Ninth, which of the following, if true, would most clearly weaken the chances of survival? Now, this is a rather tricky question. ये critical reasoning वाला question आ गया, right? ये critical reasoning वाला question आ गया कि इनमें से कौन सा आपके weaken करेगा chances को. So let's read all the options and see. Federal Reserve Board governors have no experience with having to reconcile various languages and cultures into their financial policies. Okay. The prices for most cosmetics in Belgium and the Netherlands are virtually identical. Okay. Some of the legislation that is necessary for price reform will take years to put into effect. Are we concerned about how long it will take for them to be put into effect? We are concerned about ECB. We're not concerned about the length or how long the legislations will take, right? So I can directly eliminate this. As prices fall in Russia, which is not part of the European Union, commercial entities in Europe will buy Russian raw materials. We are not concerned about Russia, we are only concerned about Europe, right? We're not concerned about Russia. The term of service for each member of the ECB's governing board is only 3 years. What does that matter, right? Even if it is 3 years, even if it's 5 years, 10 years, we have no direct correlation. So I eliminate this. I'm left with A and B. Let me now dig deep into what A and B are saying. A says Federal Reserve Board governors have no experience with having to reconcile various languages and cultures into their financial policies. But this is only an example for us, right? Federal Reserve Board is only an example for us. If they have no experience, so what? This is a new thing we are doing. We have to keep our mind open. We have to keep open channels of communication. So even if Federal Reserve Board is an example for me, uh, it does not matter whether they are able to reconcile or not. I am ECB. So B, my friends, the prices for most cosmetics in Belgium and the Netherlands are virtually identical. Now if you go to the third para, if I'm not wrong, right, how they talked about coffee somewhere here, right? Blue jeans. And since Scandinavian countries show no signs of adopting the high demand for coffee products that exist in France and Italy, coffee prices will remain much higher in southern Europe than in the north. Now, understand that what this question is trying to tell us. Which of the following, if true, would most clearly weaken the chance of ECB survival? The prices for most cosmetics in Belgium and the Netherlands are virtually identical. The prices are identical, but the the buying power, the purchasing power, it is not identical, right? The prices are identical, but the purchasing power is not identical. So if this is true, then it weakens the chance, क्योंकि फिर आप प्राइस को वो कैसे करोगे, चेंज कैसे करोगे, आप प्राइस को ट्वीक कैसे करोगे, right? This is what you have to do, right? This is what you have to do. You have to stabilize everything. You have to bring everything in one line. So if their prices are virtually identical but the purchasing power is different, how do you rectify it? Right? So this is kind of ringing the bells in my head. All right, this was again, you have to understand the meaning of the comprehension, meaning of what the passage is trying to convey to be able to answer such questions, guys. And finally, this is the last question. Trust me, this is a very long comprehension. मेरे को लग रहा है तुम लोगों का भी सर खप गया होगा, but this is, trust me, the last question. According to the passage, price stability within the European Union is affected on all of the following except regional tastes. It is affected on regional tastes. Yes, price stability is affected on regional tastes. Coffee की हमने बात करी थी, right? So this is the correct answer. मतलब I can accept पूछा है, तो इस पे डिपेंडेंट है तो मैं इसलिए क्रॉस आउट करूंगा. Currency exchange rates, were they affected on currency exchange rates? I'm not sure. I'll have to go and revisit the passage. Consumer bargain hunting, yes, because there was, if you remember, there was a line where they were saying that, कहाँ गया यही तो है. हाँ, Europeans are more likely to seek out best price regardless of geography, right? तो ये तो है ही, कंज्यूमर बार्गेन हंटिंग के ऊपर है. लेजिस्लेशन मेरे को अच्छे से याद है, लेजिस्लेशन मेंशन था कि लेजिस्लेशन पे है. कंज्यूमर वेल्थ, यस, कंज्यूमर वेल्थ के ऊपर है. यहाँ पे है ना, प्राइसेस स्टे लोअर टू अकोमोडेट वीकर बाइंग पावर. कंज्यूमर वेल्थ के ऊपर है ना, पर्सनल इनकम्स इन स्पेन एंड पोर्टुगल आर वेल बिलो यूरोपियन एवरेज एज दे हैव बीन फॉर डेकेड्स, राइट? इसके ऊपर तो है ही है. सो द ओनली थिंग दैट इज लेफ्ट इज द एक्सचेंज रेट्स. Is it affected? Is price stability within the European Union affected on all of the following? It is not affected on the currency exchange rate. It is affected on currencies, it is affected on euro, but it is not affected on the currency exchange rate. Okay, guys, so this was a rather heavy comprehension, and through this, I've basically tried to give you a taste of all kinds of questions. ये 6 to 10 हमने काफी specific questions करे, जिसके लिए we had to revisit the passage again and again. But if you remember from the first to the fourth or the fifth, जहाँ पे हम primary purpose निकाल रहे हैं, हम लोग central idea निकाल रहे हैं, हम लोग structure निकाल रहे हैं, हम लोग tone निकाल रहे हैं, right? For questions like these, if you've written down the summary well, then you don't have to revisit the passage again and again. But for specific questions, you have to, right? So I'll see you again, guys. Thank you for attending today's lesson. Go through the comprehension once more. Do that, please. Go through the comprehension once more, because it is very, very important for us to be comfortable with it all, right? And we'll do quite a lot of practice. Don't worry. अगर पहली बार में इतना अच्छे से नहीं आया, आपको आंसर्स भी नहीं समझ आ रहे थे, don't worry. We'll practice a lot so that we develop our skill. So we develop our hold on this, right? So yeah, I'll see you again, guys. If you have any questions, just comment on the video. I'll be sure to respond to them. I'll be sure to address all of those in the next video as well. So do that. And till that time, stay safe, stay strong, and stay mellow. Thank you.